He told everyone he was flying out of state for business. But in the dead of night, my neighbor hammered on my door, his face a mask of panic, insisting I see who was sitting casually in his living room. Hello, everyone. Before we dive deeper, please click that subscribe and like button so we can keep sharing compelling stories like this one. Go ahead and write in the comments which city you're watching from. I hope today brings blessings, abundant fortune, and profound happiness to us all. Amen. My left cheek burned, but my heart was a raging inferno this morning. Preston had just struck me across the face, all because of a shirt collar he deemed insufficiently crisp. Even under a microscope, I swear that shirt was pressed to perfection. He stood there, glaring at me with the same condescending eyes he used on his subordinates at the office, while adjusting the lapels of his designer suit, a suit that probably cost more than a decent used car. It's funny, isn't it? A man can look so dignified and commanding in tailored clothes, yet his behavior can be more primitive than a caveman fighting over a piece of meat. I could only look down, cupping my throbbing cheek and fighting back tears that refused to fall, having been wrung dry too many times before. If you saw Preston out in the world, you'd probably ask for his autograph or a selfie. He was the very definition of a dream man for the PTA moms and the role model for all the dads on the block. He was a successful real estate developer, a frequent donor to the local youth center, and always offered a charming smile to the security guard at our gated community's entrance. His public image was spotless, gleaming, and flawless, just like the marble floors of our sprawling mansion. But no one knew that behind the high walls of our home, Preston transformed into a cruel prison warden. He had a set of nonsensical rules that had to be obeyed. If I deviated even slightly, his hands moved far faster than his mouth. Sometimes I thought he should have been a professional fighter instead of a businessman. It's a shame his talent for hitting was reserved only for his wife. This house felt more like an enemy fortress than a comfortable home. There were security cameras in every corner, except the bathrooms, and the high fence was topped with menacing spikes. The guard at the front gate was more loyal to Preston than a bloodhound. It was impossible for me to even think about running out the gate with a suitcase. My phone was inspected every night as if I were a secret agent about to sell state secrets. I was trapped, completely and utterly trapped in this cold, gilded cage. I tried once, confiding in a neighbor, but Preston skillfully twisted the facts. He told her I was under a lot of stress and prone to hallucinations. Brilliant, wasn't it? Suddenly, I was the crazy one in everyone else's eyes. I realized that if I continued to stay silent and submissive, my name would be carved on a tombstone by next year. My mind started racing, searching for a way out. Not a physical escape, because I knew I couldn't run 100 yards without sounding like an asthmatic, let alone outrun Preston. I needed a way to leave this house legitimately, in front of a crowd, and leave Preston utterly powerless. I needed witnesses. I needed a neutral territory where Preston's authority meant nothing. The only place that came to mind was a hospital. Yes, a hospital, a place for the sick, but to me, it looked like a 5-star hotel offering the sweet promise of freedom. Preston had one major weakness, and it wasn't kryptonite like in the superhero movies. His weakness was his reputation. He was terrified of people discovering his true, rotten self. He was afraid of being seen as a failed husband, as a brute, as an immoral man. That's why he never hit me anywhere that would be visible when I was fully clothed. He was clever, but devious. That's why I had to create a scenario where he would be forced to take me out of the house in public, but in a way that he couldn't be directly blamed. I had to get hurt, but not by his hand. It was a crazy plan, I knew, but living with a monster requires a little bit of madness to survive. My weapon of choice today wasn't a pistol or a kitchen knife, but a bottle of lemon-scented floor cleaner. The smell was fresh, but its function this time would be devastating, or at least excruciatingly painful. That afternoon, after Preston left for work in his luxury sedan, I went into the master bathroom. This bathroom was probably the size of a college dorm room, with unforgivingly hard marble floors. I poured a generous amount of the cleaning liquid near the sink area. It was slick, dangerously slick. I stared at the soapy puddle, swallowing hard. This was going to hurt. It would definitely hurt. But this physical pain would be nothing compared to the emotional agony of being slapped every morning over a wrinkled shirt or coffee that wasn't sweet enough. My heart beat faster than it did waiting for a Black Friday sale at my favorite department store. Time seemed to crawl that evening. I had already showered, put on a modest nightgown, and was waiting for the sound of Preston's car pulling into the garage. Around 6 o'clock, the smooth purr of the engine arrived. There he is, I thought. The great master has returned. I heard his footsteps enter the house, heard him greet the housekeeper with his usual cold tone. I stood in the bathroom, right at the edge of the trap I had set. I took a deep breath, praying silently that my bones were strong and that nothing would break permanently. The moment I heard the bedroom doorknob turn, I knew it was time. This was the greatest performance of my life. And what a shame there would be no Oscar for the category of Best Actress in a Faked Fall. "Preston, you're home," I called out from the bathroom, getting his attention. Then, without another moment of hesitation, I stepped my right foot directly onto the puddle of soap. My balance vanished instantly. The world spun wildly. My feet slid out from under me, and my body was airborne for a split second before gravity yanked me mercilessly downward. My back and hips slammed into the marble floor with a sickening thud, loud enough to make anyone who heard it cringe. I screamed, a loud, piercing scream. It was partly from the genuine shock and pain, but partly dramatized to ensure it reached the security guard's post at the gate. The sound of my body hitting the marble floor silenced the entire house. The pain was extraordinary, like being hit with a sledgehammer in the lower back. My vision swam with black spots, but I had to stay focused. I squeezed my eyes shut, controlled my breathing to make it seem shallow, and relaxed every muscle in my body. I had to be unconscious. I had to look helpless. If I just woke up moaning in pain, Preston would probably just tell me to rub some ointment on it and scold me for being clumsy. No, I had to make this look severe. I had to make him panic. Preston burst in, his face paler than a hospital wall when he saw me lying motionless on the floor. I could feel the vibration of his hurried footsteps approaching. "Ellie, Ellie!" His voice was laced with panic, not the sad panic of a man whose beloved wife had fallen. I was sure of that. He was panicking at the thought of me dying here. The police would come, the media would come, and his perfect life would be torn apart. He slapped my cheek, a little too hard, really. Such rough hands. "Ellie, wake up. Don't you dare cause trouble now," he hissed. Even his first words were selfish. He felt for my pulse. His hand was trembling. "Good, Preston. Tremble. Because from this day forward, it's your turn to feel uneasy." Preston might have been a pro at carrying the weight of his ego, but when it came to lifting the limp body of his wife, he had no talent whatsoever. I could feel his exasperated breath on my ear as he struggled to haul me up, my body deliberately as floppy as possible. Instead of worrying if I had broken a rib, he was busy muttering under his breath about how inconvenient this whole situation was. His hands gripped my arms stiffly as if he were carrying a leaking bag of rice that needed to be moved before it dirtied his precious marble floors. I wanted so badly to laugh at his struggle, but of course I had to suppress it with all my might, or this whole act would fall apart before it even began. Preston yelled for our driver in a tone that could wake the dead. Manny, our old, loyal driver, who was often the target of Preston's tirades, came running into the house, out of breath. I heard his heavy footsteps on the floor. "Sir, what happened to ma'am?" he asked, his voice trembling. Preston cut him off with a bark. "Don't ask questions. Get the car ready now. Open the back door wide, quickly." His command was short, sharp, and full of irritation. Manny was just asking out of concern, but in Preston's eyes, the concern of an employee was just an annoyance. I was sure Manny was now scurrying to the garage, mumbling prayers that he wouldn't get yelled at again today. The process of moving my body from the bathroom floor to the car was its own form of torture that I had to endure for my ticket to freedom. Preston lifted me roughly. There was no gentleness at all, as if I were a piece of scrap metal being tossed into a junk pile. My head bumped lightly against the doorframe as he carried me out, and I had to bite my own tongue to keep from crying out. The pain was enough to make me dizzy, but it was a worthy price for my grand plan. He carried me down the main staircase of our mansion. Each of his steps felt like a jolt, causing my hip that had hit the floor to throb with renewed pain. Once we reached the car, Preston practically threw my body onto the back seat with all the grace of a charging rhinoceros. I landed on the expensive leather in a rather uncomfortable position, but I didn't dare adjust myself. "Go, Manny, drive fast. But don't you dare scratch the car," Preston ordered, slamming the car door right next to my ear. The luxury car then sped out of the gates of our fortress. Inside the car, the tension was suffocating. I kept my eyes closed, regulating my breathing to remain shallow and weak. Meanwhile, Preston was busy wiping the sweat from his own forehead, not once checking to see if I was still breathing. His priority was always, and only, himself. Even in an emergency like this, throughout the drive, Preston endlessly cursed at the traffic, which was perfectly normal for rush hour. He was angry at a motorcycle that passed us, angry at a red light he thought was too long, and even angry at a hot dog vendor casually crossing the street. "Get out of the way, you people don't know the rules," he muttered at the other drivers who couldn't hear him. How ironic. He was angry at people who didn't follow the rules, when at home, he was the #1 violator of basic human rights. I could only listen to his ranting while fighting off nausea from Manny's forced, reckless driving. It felt like my insides were being churned in a blender. Preston's personality shift occurred the moment our tires hit the pavement of the hospital parking lot. It was a magical moment that always amazed and disgusted me. As soon as the car stopped in front of the emergency room entrance, Preston's red, angry face vanished, replaced by a pale, worried expression that was utterly convincing. He leaped out of the car, yelling loudly, "Doctor, nurse, please help my wife, quickly." His voice trembled dramatically, as if he were the most loving husband on the face of the earth. If a film director had been there, Preston would have been offered a role in a soap opera on the spot. Nurses came running with a gurney, responding swiftly to the emergency call from the well-dressed, hysterical-looking man. My body was moved again, this time by the hands of nurses who were far more skilled and humane than my own husband. I was laid on the firm gurney, which felt like heaven compared to the bathroom floor. My wife slipped, nurse. She just suddenly fell and lost consciousness. "Please do your best. Cost is not an issue," Preston exclaimed, jogging alongside the gurney as it was pushed inside. He said the phrase "cost is not an issue" with a slightly raised volume, intentionally so everyone there could hear that he was a wealthy, responsible man. What a show-off. Even at the hospital, he was still building his image. The fluorescent lights of the hospital corridor flickered behind my closed eyelids. It was glaring and dizzying. The squeak of the gurney's wheels on the linoleum floor sounded loud in my ears, competing with the low hum of other patients and the shouts of medical staff. I felt the chill of the hospital's air conditioning on my skin, a stark contrast to the air at home, which always felt hot and suffocating. Preston was still holding my hand, chattering on. "Hold on, darling. I'm right here. I won't let anything happen to you." I'm sure he was only doing it because there were so many eyes on him. If we were alone in some dark alley, he probably would have left me by the side of the road. Upon reaching an examination bay, a green curtain was pulled shut, separating us from the hustle and bustle of the outside world. "Sir, please wait outside for a moment. We need to examine the patient," a nurse said firmly. Preston started to object. "I'm her husband. I need to know her condition." But the nurse was just as firm. "Precisely because you're her husband, you need to remain calm outside so we can work. The doctor will explain everything to you later." Finally, with great reluctance and probably a fear of damaging his image by arguing in a hospital, Preston let go of my hand. I heard his footsteps move away, followed by the sound of the curtain being opened and closed again. Finally, for the first time today, I could breathe a sigh of relief without having to pretend to hold my breath. Although my body ached all over and my head was spinning, it felt as if a heavy weight had been lifted from my chest. I had made it out. I was in neutral territory. But this was just the beginning. I knew Preston was pacing outside like a caged animal, concocting what lies he would tell the doctor. He would surely say I was clumsy, that the floor was slippery, or that I had a history of low blood pressure. Whatever it was, he would make sure he came out clean. But he forgot one thing. In a hospital, a human body can tell a story more honestly than its owner's mouth. And my body had many sad stories hidden beneath my clothes, just waiting to be read by the right person. Hospitals have a strange, distinct smell. a mixture of sharp disinfectant and the lingering scent of despair. For most people, this smell is nauseating and makes them want to go home as quickly as possible. But strangely, as I lay on this narrow bed with its scratchy white sheets, the hospital's sterile scent smelled like the most expensive perfume in the world. It was the scent of freedom, the scent of a safe distance between me and the high walls of Preston's house. I kept my eyes closed, but my ears were working overtime, taking in the situation around me. The green curtains surrounding me felt like a temporary fortress. Here, behind this thin, dusty fabric, Preston couldn't just lash out. There were nurses bustling about, a patient in the next bay groaning from a toothache, and a doctor on duty making rounds. This crowd was my shield. A young nurse entered my bay. Her steps were quick, making a soft squeaking sound as her rubber-soled shoes met the floor. She began to wrap a blood pressure cuff around my left arm. I felt the fabric tighten, pressing against the skin that concealed a faint purple bruise from Preston's grip 3 days ago. It hurt slightly as the cuff inflated, squeezing my already battered flesh. I held my breath, trying not to wince. "Her pressure is a bit high," the nurse murmured, mostly to herself. "Of course it's high," I thought. "If you had a husband whose hobby was hitting you like a drum, your blood pressure would be through the roof every day too." Outside the curtain, I heard Preston's voice on the phone. His tone was low, a whisper, but full of emphasis. "Yes, clean the bathroom now. Don't leave any trace of the soap. Just say she slipped on some water. And don't let anyone else into the master bedroom." That devious man. Even when his wife was lying unconscious, as far as he knew, his brain was busy fabricating a cover-up to keep his image pristine. He was more afraid of his reputation being tarnished than of me having a concussion. I wanted so badly to sit up and shout his lies through a megaphone, but I knew it wasn't the right time. "Be patient, Ellie," I told myself. "Play it smart. Let him dig his own grave." A short while later, the curtain to my bay was drawn back with a firm, authoritative motion. A small breeze brushed against my face. Through my slightly parted eyelashes, I saw a man in a long white coat enter. It wasn't the young nurse, but a senior doctor. His hair was graying at the temples, and a pair of glasses hung around his neck. He held a clipboard with my medical chart. His aura was different. If Preston had the aura of an oppressive ruler, this doctor had a calm, profound presence, like a deep river hiding many secrets. He stood beside my bed, observed my face for a moment, then began to check the pulse in my neck with fingers that were cool but steady. "Excuse me, doctor. How is my wife?" Preston's voice suddenly cut through the quiet of the bay. Apparently, he had finished his call and was back to playing the role of the devoted husband. He had slipped past the curtain without permission, his face once again set to maximum anxiety mode. He was breathing a bit heavily, perhaps from running back from the waiting room, or from running from the truth. He stood at the foot of my bed, looking at the doctor with the same demanding gaze he used when the service at a 5-star restaurant was too slow. "Please explain, doctor. Why isn't she conscious yet? Are there any broken bones? I need to know." The senior doctor didn't answer immediately. He calmly finished his examination first, placed his stethoscope back around his neck, and then slowly turned to face Preston. His movements were deliberately slow, as if creating a dramatic pause in a thriller. When the doctor finally lifted his head and met Preston's eyes, time seemed to stand still in that small room. The background noise of the ER suddenly felt distant and faint. Preston's reaction was the most satisfying thing I had ever witnessed in my life. His face, which had been flushed from his feigned anxiety, suddenly turned a pale, sickly gray, the color of wet cement. His eyes went wide, not with anger, but with sheer terror. His mouth fell slightly open, but no sound came out, as if his vocal cords had just been snapped. His legs buckled. I could see his knees trembling violently beneath his expensive trousers. He took a step back, bumping into the IV pole behind him with a loud clang. He looked like a thief caught red-handed by the homeowner, only this time the homeowner was holding a shotgun. "Good evening, Mr. Davenport," the doctor said. His voice was flat, cold, and pierced right through you. There was none of the standard friendly tone a doctor uses with a patient's family. "It's a small world, isn't it? Do you remember me?" The doctor gave a faint smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. His gaze was sharp, aimed directly at Preston's core. On the name tag pinned to his white coat, The name was clearly visible: Dr. Miles, M.D. Preston swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing with difficulty. Beads of sweat the size of corn kernels started to form on his temples. He tried to speak, but his voice was caught in his throat, only a small squeak escaping, like a mouse caught in a trap. Dr. Miles," he stammered. Preston's usual sky-high arrogance shattered into a million pieces on the hospital floor, all from a single look from this middle-aged doctor. Lying there, still pretending to be unconscious, I wanted nothing more than to open my eyes wide and grab a bucket of popcorn. Whoever Dr. Miles was, he had just turned the monster in my house into a soggy cracker. The atmosphere in the room suddenly became incredibly tense and awkward. Dr. Miles didn't break his gaze for a second. He took one step closer to Preston, causing my husband to stumble back in panic until his back was against the curtain. "I will be handling your wife's case tonight, Doctor," Miles said slowly, emphasizing each syllable with a deep, hidden meaning. "I will make sure she receives the the care that my sister never had the chance to get." That sentence hung in the air like a storm cloud before a downpour. His sister? Whose sister? My mind raced, even with my eyes closed. There was a dark history between these two men, a history that involved someone's life, and somehow I felt that this history was now my only weapon for survival. Preston was still frozen, his breathing short and ragged. He looked like he wanted to bolt, to run out of that room, but his feet seemed nailed to the floor. Tonight, in this ER bay that smelled of antiseptic, the wheel of fate had begun to turn. The hunter had now become the hunted. The air inside the small bay suddenly felt as heavy as concrete, pressing down on the chests of everyone within. Preston, usually as fierce as a hungry lion, had shrunk into a drenched kitten in the presence of Dr. Miles. The doctor didn't need to shout or slam his fist on a table. He simply stood tall, his hands in the pockets of his white coat. "Mr. Davenport," Dr. Miles said again, his tone polite but firm, like a principal reprimanding a delinquent student. "Please wait outside. Medical procedure requires me to examine the patient without family interference, especially when the patient is unconscious. You're blocking the oxygen in this room." That last sentence was a subtle but sharp jab, implying that Preston's very presence was toxic to anyone near him. Normally, if anyone dared to order Preston around like that, they would have been verbally eviscerated until their ears rang. But this time, Preston just nodded jerkily, like a broken robot. His face was still ashen, his eyes not daring to meet Dr. Miles's gaze. "Fine, doctor. Please. Take care of my wife," he mumbled, then quickly turned and fled the bay. His footsteps sounded like they were dragging, as if his knees had genuinely given out. I almost smiled wide at the sight. It turns out there's always a bigger fish, and for a domineering husband, there's a doctor from the past who is far more terrifying. The sound of the curtain being pulled shut was like the sound of a fortress gate being locked, providing an immense sense of security. There was a moment of silence. I kept my eyes closed, waiting to see what would happen next. Would Dr. Miles call another nurse? Or would he give me a shot? Suddenly, I felt a gentle touch on my shoulder, not an examining touch, but a reassuring one. "Mrs. Davenport." Dr. Miles's voice was close, a soft whisper next to my ear. "Mr. Davenport is gone. You can open your eyes now. Your acting is good, but your breathing is a little too steady for someone with severe back pain." Hearing that, my eyes flew open, wide with shock and embarrassment. I'd been caught. I blinked a few times, adjusting to the bright fluorescent light overhead. In front of me, Dr. Miles was smiling. Not a cynical smile, but a sad, understanding one. He pulled over a small stool and sat down beside me. "Don't worry," he said, scribbling something on his clipboard, pretending to be busy so anyone passing by wouldn't get suspicious. "I won't expose your secret. I know you're not unconscious, and I also know you slipped, not just because the floor was wet, but because you wanted to get out of that house. Am I right?" I was speechless. My tongue felt thick in my mouth. How could he know all that in such detail? Was he a psychic masquerading as a medical specialist? Dr. Miles put down his pen. Then, very carefully, he rolled up the long sleeve of my nightgown. There, On the pale white skin of my upper arm were the clear marks of purple and yellowing bruises. Some were new, others were fading. They were the abstract art created by Preston's pinches and grips every time he got annoyed. "A bathroom floor can't pinch an arm this hard, Mrs. Davenport," he said softly, pointing to the bruises. "A marble floor is an inanimate object. It doesn't have fingers to hurt people." The tears I had been holding back so desperately finally broke free, streaming down my face and soaking the thin hospital pillow. It wasn't because of the physical pain, but because of the incredible relief of having someone believe me without needing a lengthy explanation. For so long, I had felt like I was screaming alone in a vacuum. "Help me, doctor," I whispered, my voice choked with sobs. "I'm afraid to go home. If I go back, he'll be furious about this." "Doctor," Miles nodded, his expression hardening as he thought of Preston. He took a tissue from the side table and handed it to me. "I know that man's character all too well, doctor," Miles said, his gaze drifting to the white wall across from us. 5 years ago, another woman was brought to this hospital by Preston. The case was exactly the same. He said she slipped in the master bathroom. She arrived in a coma and never woke up. My heart felt like it stopped for a second. "Her name was Rebecca, doctor," Miles continued, his voice trembling with suppressed emotion. "She was my only sister, Preston's first wife. It felt like being struck by lightning on a clear day. So, the rumors about Preston's first wife dying suddenly were true, and she was the sister of the doctor now sitting in front of me. No wonder Preston had been so terrified. He had just run into the brother-in-law of the woman who had died at his hands. I was stationed overseas at the time," Dr. Miles recounted. "I didn't get back in time to save Rebecca. Preston refused an autopsy. He paid people off to have her buried quickly, citing religious reasons and privacy. I didn't have any solid proof back then, just a suspicion that has burned in my heart every single day." Dr. Miles looked at me directly, his eyes moist but shining with a powerful resolve. "I failed to save my sister, Mrs. Davenport, but I swear to God, I will not let Preston hurt another woman in the same way. Tonight, you are safe here. I'm going to diagnose you with a mild concussion, so you'll have to be admitted for at least 3 days. We'll buy some time." He squeezed my hand for a moment, transferring his strength. "But you have to promise me one thing. You have to be brave. We can't just play defense. We have to fight back, because a monster like Preston won't stop until he is stopped by force." I nodded firmly, wiping away the last of my tears. Tonight, in this cold ER room, a secret alliance was formed. It was no longer between a doctor and a patient, but between 2 victims demanding justice. Conspiring with a medical specialist in the emergency room felt like planning a coup d'etat in a neighborhood watch booth. It was tense, but there was a strange sense of security. "Doctor," Miles moved quickly, drafting a medical strategy that felt more like a movie script than a healthcare procedure. He scribbled on the medical chart with a serious expression, as if calculating a complex mathematical formula, when in reality, he was just fabricating a story to keep me here longer. "We'll go with a mild concussion and pelvic trauma," he whispered, his eyes still on the paper. His hand danced across the page. "This is the most effective excuse. The patient can't move much and requires close observation. And most importantly, she can't be taken home against medical advice due to the risk of a secondary brain hemorrhage." The term brain hemorrhage sounded terrifying to a layperson, and that was our main weapon to scare the cowardice out of Preston. I could only nod obediently like a star pupil, allowing my fate to be written by the hand of this doctor nursing a long-held grudge. It was so ironic. I used to beg Preston to let me leave the house just to buy groceries, and now I was begging a doctor to lock me up in a hospital room. Life certainly has a dark sense of humor. Dr. Miles straightened his white coat, took a deep breath, and transformed his expression from warm and empathetic to cold and professional. He was ready to face the monster waiting outside the curtain. "Remember, Mrs. Davenport," was his final instruction before turning away. "You are still dizzy, nauseous, and don't remember the details of what happened. Let me be your shield." The sound of Dr. Miles's firm footsteps faded, and the swoosh of the curtain being pulled back marked the beginning of the second round of this mental battle. From behind the thin green fabric that separated us, I strained my ears, listening to every sound. Preston immediately pounced with a barrage of questions as soon as he saw the doctor. His voice was frantic, his pitch fluctuating erratically, just like someone caught cheating on a final exam. "Doctor, how is she? Is my wife going to be okay? Can she go home now? I have a private doctor at home, with a full set of equipment. She can be treated there." Preston was trying hard to dominate the conversation, using his wealth and resources as his ace card, hoping this doctor would be dazzled by his money. However, Dr. Miles was not the type to be bought with promises of luxury facilities or a thick envelope. I heard the doctor's calm, flat voice respond, each sentence like a slap across Preston's face. "Mr. Davenport, your wife suffered a severe impact to her head and hip. There are indications of a concussion. Taking her home now would be endangering her life. If you insist, you can sign a form refusing medical advice. But remember, if anything happens on the way or at home, it will be purely your negligence and could become a legal matter." The threat of a legal matter was the checkmate for Preston. For a man obsessed with his reputation, the law and the police were two things to be avoided like a contagious disease. Silence fell in the ER hallway for a few seconds that felt like an eternity. Preston was probably calculating the pros and cons in his bald head. I could picture his face now, flushed red, holding back the anger he couldn't unleash, his eyes darting around looking for an escape route. He was cornered. On one hand, he wanted to take me home to control me again. On the other, he was terrified of dealing with Dr. Miles, who knew his dark history. Finally, Preston's voice was heard again, this time much weaker, like a slowly deflating tire. "Fine. Do what's best. I want her in the best room, a first-class suite. No, the most luxurious one in this hospital. Don't put her with other patients." The request for a luxury room wasn't out of love for me, but out of paranoia. He didn't want me sharing a room with another patient who might be friendly and chatty. He was afraid I would confide in my bedside neighbor about my husband's hobby of domestic violence. He wanted to isolate me, even in the hospital. "Doctor?" Miles agreed to the request quickly, perhaps thinking that I would be safer and calmer in a private room. "Very well, we'll prepare the room. Please handle the administration at the front desk. I will ensure Mrs. Davenport is stable before she is moved." After that debate ended, the nurses returned to move me to an inpatient room. The journey from the ER to the upper floor felt like a small victory parade for me. I was pushed through quiet hospital corridors, watching the ceiling lights streak by. There was no Preston gripping my hand painfully, no angry barks, no threatening glares, just the sound of the gurney wheels and a nurse humming softly. When we arrived at the room, I almost laughed at its luxury. It looked more like a 4-star hotel suite than a place for sick people. There was a plush sofa, a mini fridge, a large flat-screen TV, and a wide window overlooking the city lights. Preston truly went all out, throwing money away for the sake of his ego and privacy. Once the nurse finished setting up my IV and left me alone, the door opened slowly. Preston came in. He was no longer in a panic. His face was back to its usual flat expression, his mask of dignity perfectly in place again. He walked around the room, inspecting the bathroom, the closets, even peeking behind the curtains, just like a detective searching for listening devices. After confirming the room was secure, he approached my bed. He stood over me, his gaze not one of affection, but a cold, probing stare. "Ellie," he called softly. I slowly opened my eyes, putting on the weak and confused expression I had practiced. "Preston," I answered faintly. He leaned his face close to mine. The scent of his expensive cologne mixed with the smell of his anxious sweat. "You will not act up in here. Don't say anything strange to the doctors or nurses, especially not that doctor from earlier." His finger jabbed stiffly towards the door. "Remember, my image is everything. If any rumors come out of your mouth, you know the consequences." The threat sounded cliché, like a line from a cartoon villain, but I knew he was serious. "It hurts, Preston," I groaned, changing the subject. I didn't want to argue. I just wanted him to leave. Preston grunted in annoyance, as if my pain was just a ploy to make his life difficult. Which, to be fair, it was. He straightened up, smoothing his slightly wrinkled suit. "I have to go home for a bit. Grab a change of clothes and take care of some work. I'll be back tomorrow morning. Don't even think about getting out of this bed." After making sure my phone was placed on a table far out of my reach, he finally left. The sound of the door closing firmly was the most beautiful music I had heard all night. I was alone. Truly alone in a cool, quiet room. No security camera staring at me from the corner of the ceiling. No ridiculous curfew. I watched the IV fluid drip slowly, one drop at a time, counting down the moments of my freedom. Doctor, Miles had given me 3 days. 3 days to plan my next move. 3 days to find out what really happened to Rebecca. That poor first wife. That night, I couldn't sleep, even though my body was exhausted. My mind drifted to the past, recalling every strange detail in our home that I had previously dismissed. When we first married and moved into Preston's house, I once found an old gold earring wedged in a crack in the bathroom cabinet. At the time, Preston said it belonged to his deceased mother, but now, after hearing Dr. Miles's story, the hairs on my arms stood up. What if it belonged to Rebecca? And why was Preston so obsessed with keeping that bathroom floor perfectly dry and clean, even getting enraged over a single drop of water? My mind began to piece together a horrifying puzzle. The master bathroom in our house wasn't just a place to get clean. It was a crime scene that had been meticulously scrubbed. Preston thought he had erased all the evidence, but he forgot that a crime is like a dead rat hidden in the ceiling. No matter how much perfume you spray, the stench will eventually leak out, and I was just starting to smell it. Suddenly, there was a soft knock on my door, making me jump and nearly rip out my IV line. My heart pounded. Was Preston back? Did he forget his wallet? Or had he changed his mind and decided to drag me home tonight? The door creaked open, and Dr. Miles's head poked in. He looked tired, with dark circles under his eyes, but his faint smile was still there. "Sorry to disturb you so late, Mrs. Davenport," he whispered as he slipped inside, carefully closing the door behind him. He wasn't checking on me as a patient. Instead, he pulled a small, folded piece of paper from his coat pocket. "Preston has gone home. I saw his car leave the premises," he reported, like a secret agent. He quickly tucked the paper under my pillow. "This is my personal cell number and the address of a safe house run by a friend of mine, just in case our plan goes south." He looked at me intently. "Tomorrow, I'll arrange for you to have a head scan. It will take a long time, and Preston won't be allowed in the room. That's when we can talk more freely. Now, get some rest. You'll need your strength. Our enemy is not an ordinary man. He's a madman disguised as a sane one." After Dr. Miles left, I felt for the paper under my pillow. Its texture was rough against my fingertips, but it felt more valuable than a property deed. I closed my eyes, this time really trying to sleep. Outside the window, the city lights twinkled as if cheering me on. For the first time in this 5-year hellish marriage, I felt a flicker of hope. I was no longer a submissive wife waiting to be slapped. My name is Eleanor, and I have just declared war. The morning sunlight filtering through the thick hospital curtains felt warmer than my husband's embrace had in the last 5 years. I woke up stiff all over, but my heart felt as light as a helium balloon released into the sky. There was no shouting for coffee to serve as my morning alarm, no slamming doors or complaints about dust on the vanity. There was only the gentle hum of the air conditioner and the chirping of sparrows on the 5th-floor window ledge. For a moment, I forgot I was a wife pretending to have a concussion. I felt like a queen on vacation, except my servants wore white scrubs and the breakfast was bland and salt-free. My morning peace was shattered when the door opened to reveal a dapper-looking Preston. He entered carrying a container from a famous gourmet deli, its rich aroma filling the room. It was the scent of a legendary chicken noodle soup, the kind people line up for blocks to buy. "Good morning, darling," he greeted me with a wide smile that looked forced, as if his lips were being pulled back by invisible wires. He placed the container on the table, then approached me and gave my forehead a fleeting kiss. It felt as cold and impersonal as kissing a wall. "I brought your favorite soup. Hospital food is probably terrible, right? I don't want my wife getting skinny. People will think I'm not taking good care of her." See, even when it came to food, all he cared about was what other people thought of him. He opened the container, pouring its contents into a ceramic bowl he had brought from who knows where. "Come on, let me feed you," he said, holding out a spoonful. I wanted to refuse, but refusing Preston when he was in model husband mode was asking for trouble. So I opened my mouth, accepting spoonful after spoonful of soup that suddenly tasted as bitter as medicine. As he fed me, he dabbed at the corners of my mouth with a napkin, exactly like a father caring for a toddler at daycare. If a nurse had walked in then, she would have melted at the sight of how romantic Mr. Davenport was. In reality, he was pressing the spoon against my teeth hard enough to make my gums ache. "My business associate is coming to visit this afternoon. You need to look fresh, you hear," he whispered between spoonfuls. I nearly choked. "But Preston, you said I needed complete rest." "Why are you accepting visitors?" I protested quietly. Preston glared for a second, then quickly forced another smile. "It would be rude to refuse him, darling. He's an important man. You just smile. Don't talk much. I'll explain your condition. You just nod your head like one of those bobblehead dolls on a car dashboard." I swallowed hard. So even while I was sick, I had to serve as a prop to advance his business deals. Truly, Mr. Davenport's dedication to his public image was extraordinary. The breakfast torture mercifully ended when the door was knocked and Dr. Miles entered, followed by 2 nurses. Preston's face immediately tensed, like a naughty student seeing the principal walk in. "Doctor." Miles smiled pleasantly at both of us, but his eyes sent me a secret signal. "Morning." "How did you sleep, Mrs. Davenport?" he asked politely. Before I could answer, he turned to Preston. "Mr. Davenport, as planned, this morning we'll be doing a full head scan. The equipment is downstairs in a special radiology suite." Preston immediately stood up, ready to be my escort. "I'll come with her, doctor." "I'm sorry, sir." "That's not possible," Dr. Miles cut in quickly and firmly. "The radiology area is a sterile, high-radiation zone. Companions are prohibited past the prep room, except for medical personnel wearing special protective gear. You can wait here or in the guest lounge in the lobby. The procedure might take a while, about 1 to 2 hours, because of the Q and the contrast dye preparation." That explanation sounded very scientific and intimidating to a layperson. The words "high radiation" successfully made Preston's courage shrink. He was terrified of getting sick or anything that could harm his precious body. "Oh, is that so?" "It's dangerous for healthy people," Preston asked hesitantly. "Extremely risky, sir. It can affect fertility and blood cell health if you're exposed without protection," Dr. Miles answered with a deadpan expression. I was sure he was holding back laughter, watching Preston's face grow even paler. "Well then, I'll just wait here. Doctor, please take care of my wife. Don't let her get a single scratch," Preston threatened, which sounded ridiculous since I already had plenty of scratches because of him. The trip to the radiology department felt like the most enjoyable excursion of the year. Without Preston clinging to me like a leech, I could breathe freely. Dr. Miles walked beside my gurney. He maintained his professional demeanor until we were inside the private patient elevator and the doors slid shut. Once it was just the 2 of us, inside the nurse was in a separate elevator with some equipment, doctor. Miles's shoulders relaxed. "Mr. Davenport's acting is quite impressive," he commented, shaking his head. Earlier, he asked the on-duty nurse if the soup he brought was okay for a patient to eat, even after he'd already fed you half a bowl. His commitment to his image is truly something else. We arrived at the radiology prep room, a small, cold space filled with computer monitors. Dr. Miles didn't take me to the large, noisy scanning machine. Instead, he parked my gurney in a corner shielded by a thick curtain, then pulled up a chair and sat in front of me. His face turned serious again. He opened a thick folder he'd been carrying. "Mrs. Davenport, we have about 45 minutes before I have to take you back upstairs. I want to show you something." He pulled out several X-ray films. They weren't new scans of my head, but seemed to be old ones, or perhaps someone else's. "This is your X-ray that I took discreetly when you were first admitted to the ER yesterday," he said quietly. He pointed to the ribcage area on the film. "See this thin line? This is a healed fracture of a rib. It's about 1 or 2 years old." My heart fluttered. He was right. 2 years ago, Preston had kicked me so hard I had trouble breathing for a week. I never went to a doctor, just took over-the-counter painkillers and pressed a cold compress to my side while crying in the bathroom. "And this," he said, pointing to my forearm, "there's a hairline fracture in the ulna. This is medical proof, Mrs. Davenport. Your body is a walking map of torture. This isn't the result of a slip and fall yesterday afternoon." Tears welled up in my eyes again, seeing the black and white proof of my own suffering. It was horrifying to see how damaged my body was on the inside, while on the outside I always tried to appear perfect to cover up my husband's shame. "Doctor, if you have this proof, why don't we just go to the police right now?" I asked hopefully. I wanted to end all of this right this second. "Doctor," Miles shook his head slowly, his eyes filled with a deep regret. "It's not strong enough, Mrs. Davenport. Preston's lawyer is as slippery as an eel. He could argue that you have brittle bone disease or that you're clumsy and frequently fall at home. Without a witness or a recording of the incident, he could turn the tables and sue us for defamation. And if that happens, you'll be sent back to that house, and your fate will be the same as my sister, Rebecca's." The name Rebecca was mentioned again, making the cold room feel even more frigid. Rebecca had similar injuries, Dr. Miles recounted, his gaze distant. She often complained of back pain, hand pain, but always said she just bumped into a table or fell down the stairs. I was a fool back then for believing her. I thought she was just accident-prone. Then, a week before she died, she called me in the middle of the night. She said she was scared. She said Preston was acting strangely, talking to himself about cleaning stains. Dr. Miles leaned forward, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. Rebecca said she had hidden an insurance policy in that house. Not money, but something that would ensure Preston wouldn't dare harm her if it was discovered. But unfortunately, Rebecca died before she could tell me what it was, or where she hid it. Preston claimed Rebecca slipped in the bathroom, hit her head on the sink, and suffered a massive hemorrhage. "Case closed. Doctor." Miles's hands clenched into tight fists on his knees, his knuckles turning white. "So you mean that thing is still in my house?" I asked, my eyes wide. "It's highly likely, yes," Dr. Miles answered firmly. "Preston is the paranoid but careless type. If he had already found it, he would have destroyed it and been living peacefully. But look at him now. He's terrified every time he sees me. He's anxious. He's constantly monitoring you. That means he either hasn't found it yet, or he's afraid you will." This new task felt much heavier than just pretending to be sick. I had to become a detective in the villain's lair. What should I look for, Doctor? That house is enormous," I asked in despair. Dr. Miles thought for a moment. Rebecca loved to write. She kept a diary, wrote letters, wrote anything. And she had a strange habit. She liked to hide valuable things in places that are most often seen but never noticed. "A place that's bright but dark." "Bright but dark," I repeated, confused. "What kind of riddle is that? I don't fully understand it myself, Mrs. Davenport." Those were her last words to me on the phone. "Brother, if I'm gone, look in the place that is brightest, but also darkest, to Preston, Doctor." Miles glanced at his watch. "Our time is up. We have to go back upstairs before Preston gets suspicious. Remember, Mrs. Davenport, your main mission when you go home is to find what Rebecca left behind. It's the only key to putting Preston in prison for life." The journey back to my room felt completely different. I had gone down as a frightened victim. Now I was returning as a secret agent on a mission. My heart pounded, not with fear but with adrenaline. When the elevator doors opened on the 5th floor, I saw Preston standing in front of my room, impatiently tapping his foot. His face was sour. The moment he saw us, he pounced. That took forever. "You said an hour. It's been almost 2. What were you two doing down there?" "The queue was long, sir. There was an emergency trauma case from an accident," Dr. Miles replied calmly, without batting an eye. Preston grunted, then looked at me suspiciously, his eyes scanning my face as if searching for signs of betrayal. "You didn't say anything you shouldn't have down there, did you?" he whispered sharply as the nurses transferred me back to the bed. I shook my head weakly, putting on an innocent, clueless expression. What would I say, Preston? I was asleep the whole time. It was so dizzying. Preston stared at me for a long moment, then finally sighed in relief. He had no idea that behind this clueless wife's face was a brain plotting the complete destruction of his perfect life. The Cold War between us had just escalated. The afternoon sun had not yet set, but the atmosphere in the hospital room was already as gloomy as a stormy sky. As promised, or more accurately, threatened by Preston that morning, his VIP guest had indeed arrived. His name was Mr. Harrington, a business associate with a protruding belly and a laugh so boisterous it made the window panes vibrate. He came bearing a fruit basket of absurd proportions, filled with imported fruits that probably cost as much as a factory worker's monthly salary. Preston greeted him with a sickeningly obsequious style. He bowed respectfully, shook his hand firmly, and plastered the friendliest smile in the world on his face. The mask of the devoted husband and successful businessman was perfectly attached, without a single crack. "Oh, Mrs. Davenport, I hope you get well soon. I was so shocked to hear you had a fall. You're lucky to have such a vigilant husband like Mr. Davenport here," Mr. Harrington said innocently. I could only manage a thin, fake smile that felt stiff on my cheeks. I wanted to throw up hearing that praise. If only Mr. Harrington knew that this vigilant husband was the reason I was here, he probably would have choked on a grapeseed. Preston immediately chimed in with a feigned humility. "Oh, it's nothing, sir. She's my beloved wife, after all. I can't bear to see her with even a little scratch. That's why I requested the best room, so my wife can rest peacefully. The money doesn't matter, as long as my wife is healthy." He said this while gently stroking my head, the same hand that had dragged me across the floor yesterday. He was truly a world-class actor. After Mr. Harrington left, the smile vanished from Preston's face faster than money from a wallet at the end of the month. He immediately sank into the sofa, loosened his tie aggressively, and exhaled a long breath as if he had just finished a heavy workout. "All that small talk is exhausting," he grumbled. He looked at me sharply. "You did well today, not talking too much. That's how a prominent man's wife should be, graceful and obedient. Don't embarrass your husband." I just stayed silent, staring at the ceiling. In my mind, I noted another reason why I had to put this man behind bars. He treated his wife as just another accessory for his career, like a flower vase or a wall painting. Suddenly, Preston shot up and began pacing the room, as restless as a worm on a hot plate. "I don't like this place," he said abruptly, breaking the silence. "The air is stale, the nurses come in too often, and that doctor, his eyes are strange." He stopped pacing and looked at me. My gut immediately clenched. My survival instincts flared red. A paranoid Preston was the most dangerous Preston. He felt threatened, and when he felt threatened, he would seize control by force. "We're going home tomorrow morning," he decided unilaterally. My heart nearly leaped out of my chest. "But Preston? Dr. Miles said I need to be here for 3 days. My head still spins when I get up," I argued, trying to sound weak and pitiful. Dr. Miles's plan would be ruined if I went home tomorrow. I needed more time here to strategize, or at least to enjoy a moment of life without fear. "To hell with that doctor," Preston hissed. "He's a know-it-all. I saw the way he looked at me. He has no respect. I don't want you being treated by someone with a personal vendetta. Tomorrow morning, I'll handle the paperwork. We're going home, period." That evening, when Dr. Miles came for his routine checkup, the tension in the room reached a breaking point. Preston stood with his hands on his hips beside my bed, puffing out his chest as if challenging him to a duel. "Doctor, prepare my wife's discharge papers for tomorrow morning. I want to take her home for outpatient care," Preston said without any preamble. Dr. Miles, who was checking my IV, paused. He straightened up, looking at Preston calmly, but his eyes betrayed his disappointment. "Mr. Davenport, as I told you this morning, your wife's condition is not yet stable. A concussion is not a joke. What if there's swelling at home? Do you have a CT scanner in your bedroom?" The debate between the two men was more intense than a presidential debate on television. "I can hire a private nurse and a doctor on call," Preston snapped, his voice rising. "I have money. I can buy the medical equipment if I have to. The point is, I'm not comfortable with my wife staying here any longer. This hospital service is slow, not up to my standards. The classic excuse of a rich man who has run out of arguments: blame the service. Dr. Miles let out a long sigh. He knew he was in a losing position. Legally, Preston was my guardian and my husband. If he insisted on taking me home against medical advice by signing the release forms, the hospital couldn't legally detain us. Fine, if that's your decision. Dr. Miles finally said, his voice heavy, but you will have to sign a statement acknowledging that you assume all risks. And one more thing, sir. These medications must be taken on time. If Mrs. Davenport faints again, don't blame us. Preston smirked victoriously, a cunning smile that made me want to throw a pillow at his face. Just prepare the papers. I can sign them right now. After Preston stepped out for a moment to call an administrative nurse, Dr. Miles quickly approached me. We only had seconds. I'm sorry, Mrs. Davenport. I can't hold him off any longer, Dr. Miles whispered urgently, a guilty look on his face. He's too suspicious. If I force you to stay, he'll just become more vigilant and might move you to another hospital where he can buy the doctors off. I nodded in resignation, tears welling up in my eyes. My fortress was crumbling. Tomorrow, I would have to return to the lion's den alone, without the shield of this white coat. It's okay, doctor. Maybe this is how it's meant to be. I have to go back in there to find that evidence, right? Dr. Miles reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a tiny object, the size of a matchstick. It was a mobile phone memory card. Listen to me carefully. You must have an old phone or tablet at home that you don't use, right? Insert this card into it once you've found the proof. It contains a tracking and auto-recording application that connects directly to my computer system. The moment you activate it, I'll know your location and what's happening. He pressed the tiny object into my palm. Hide it somewhere safe. In the seam of your underwear. Anywhere Preston won't touch. And remember Rebecca's riddle, he added, looking me straight in the eye. A place that is brightest, but also darkest. Find that place, Mrs. Davenport. Preston is a neat freak and a control freak. He wouldn't bury evidence in the yard or throw it in a river. He's too afraid of it being found by accident. He would keep it close, somewhere he can watch it every day, but where no one else would suspect. The sound of Preston's footsteps approached from the hallway. Dr. Miles immediately stepped back, resuming his professional stance. Get a good night's rest. The journey home tomorrow will be tiring. That night, I didn't sleep a wink. I clutched the tiny memory card so tightly my palms sweated. This object, no bigger than a fingernail, was the only bridge between me and justice. Tomorrow morning, I would once again be a prisoner in my own home. I would see the cold faces of my guards, feel the chill of the marble floors, and serve the monster named Preston. But this time, something was different. I wasn't going home to surrender. I was going home as a spy. I was going home to dig a grave for my husband's career and his freedom. I stared at the clean, white hospital ceiling. The brightest, but also darkest, place. I murmured over and over like a mantra. What did it mean? Was it the garden lamp, or his office where the light was always on? No, that was too simple. Rebecca must have hidden it somewhere connected to her death, or a place that was a silent witness to her suffering. My mind flew to every corner of that mansion, searching for a clue. Tomorrow, the deadly game of hide-and-seek would begin. And this time, I was the one who was seeking. I was going to find it. The drive home from the hospital felt more like a funeral procession than a return to a comfortable home. Inside the soundproof luxury car, the silence was so thick I could hear Preston's steady breathing. He drove with one hand, completely relaxed, as if he had just picked up an online shopping package and not his ailing wife. He occasionally hummed along to the soft jazz on the radio. Meanwhile, I sat beside him, clutching my handbag as if it were a life raft in a stormy sea. I watched the congested streets through the window, seeing people outside busy with their own lives, free to laugh, free to eat a hot dog from a street vendor, free to be human. I felt an urge to jump out, roll onto the asphalt, and run as fast as I could. But of course, with my aching ribs and the automatically locked doors, that was just a foolish fantasy. The towering iron gates of our home creaked open, the automated motor welcoming the king and his favorite captive. The house was the same as when I left it, grand, painted a pristine white, with arrogant, massive pillars. But today, the house had a different aura in my eyes. I used to see it as a palace. Now I saw it as an unsolved crime scene. Manny and Maria, our housekeeper, were already standing on the porch to greet us. Their heads were bowed low, not daring to meet Preston's gaze. Poor them. Working in this house must be like defusing a time bomb. One wrong move, and everything could explode. Take her bag upstairs. Prepare some warm water, but not too hot. And remember, not a single speck of dust on the vanity, Preston commanded as soon as he got out of the car. He didn't help me this time. Perhaps he figured that now that he was back in his domain, he no longer needed to act the part of the concerned husband. I walked slowly behind him, my steps faltering. This time it wasn't an act. My body truly felt broken after the ordeal. We went up to the second floor, to the master bedroom that was the epicenter of all my nightmares. As soon as the door closed, the click of the lock being turned by Preston sounded like a judge's gavel. You rest here. Don't leave the room unless absolutely necessary. Maria will bring your meals to the door, he said flatly. He then held out his right hand, palm open. Give me your phone. I had anticipated this. I handed over my phone with a practiced look of resignation. What for, Preston? I want to let my mother know I'm home, I asked pathetically, though I already knew the answer. Preston gave a condescending smirk, the kind that belittles your intelligence. The phone's radiation is bad for your brain's recovery. Besides, you need peace and quiet. No need to read gossip or strange news. If your mother calls, I'll answer it. He slipped my phone into his pocket and walked towards the door. Before leaving, he turned back for a moment. I have an online meeting in my office downstairs. If you need anything, press the intercom button next to the bed. Don't shout, it's impolite. As soon as Preston left, I exhaled a long breath until my lungs felt empty. My knees felt weak. I sank onto the edge of the large bed with its overly slick sheets. I felt for the secret pocket I had hastily sewn into my undergarment, the small memory card from Doctor. Miles was still there, warm against my skin. Safe. Now the real challenge began. I looked around the spacious room. The large wardrobe, the vanity table, the bookshelf, and of course, the door to the sacred bathroom. Where had Rebecca hidden her proof? The brightest, but also darkest, place. The phrase spun in my head like an annoying jingle. I tried to think like Preston, to delve into his narcissistic, image-obsessed mind. Preston loved light. The house was brightly lit everywhere because he hated darkness, hated unseen corners. The brightest place, I murmured, hobbling around the room. I looked at the crystal chandelier in the center of the ceiling. It was bright, yes, but could Rebecca have climbed up there without being noticed? Unlikely. I moved to the reading lamp beside the bed. Too obvious. My gaze then fell upon the large vanity table in the corner, the place where Preston spent hours preening, ensuring no gray hairs or wrinkles had appeared. The vanity had a mirror surrounded by very bright, round bulbs, just like an actress's dressing room mirror. It was the most blinding spot in the room. When turned on, the light was momentarily blinding. Preston was madly in love with that mirror. He would stand there, admiring his own reflection. And therein lay the irony. A narcissist like Preston only sees what's on the surface of the mirror, himself. He never cared about what was behind it or what held it up. To him, the world extended only as far as his reflection. Could that be what Rebecca meant? The brightest place because of its lights, but the darkest because Preston never saw beyond his own reflection. With my heart pounding, I approached the vanity. I switched on the lights. Click. Bright white light flooded out, illuminating my pale, tired face. I ran my hands over the thick wooden frame of the mirror. It was solid. No cracks, no visible secret drawers. I started to lose hope. Was I wrong? Did she mean the garden lamp? Suddenly, my eye caught something odd. Among the rows of bulbs circling the mirror, one bulb in the bottom right corner was slightly crooked, not perfectly straight like the others. It was so subtle, easily missed if you weren't looking closely. I glanced at the bedroom door, ensuring it was still locked, then focused back on the crooked bulb. My hand trembled as I touched it. It was hot, of course. I grabbed a tissue from the box on the table to protect my hand and tried to gently twist the bulb. To the left. Scrape. It made a gritty sound. The bulb came loose from its socket. And there, Inside the dark, empty socket, I saw something. Not wires. Something black was peeking out, wedged between the ceramic base and the wooden frame. "Got you," I whispered, my voice trembling with a mix of fear and excitement. I used a bobby pin to fish the object out. It was difficult. Cold sweat trickled down my back. If Preston walked in now and saw me messing with his beloved vanity, it would be the end of me. I held my breath, trying to keep my hands steady, even as my heart threatened to leap out of my throat. Almost there. A small object fell into my tissue-covered palm. It was a micro SD card, an old one, the kind used in phones a decade ago. It was still neatly wrapped in a tiny plastic medicine baggie to protect it from the lamp's heat. I stared at the tiny object in my hand with a mix of emotions. Was this Rebecca's life? Her final voice? Was this the key that would unlock a prison door for my husband? Rebecca was a genius. She had hidden the evidence of Preston's crime right in front of his face every single day. Every morning when Preston looked in the mirror, adjusting his tie and smiling proudly at himself, he had no idea that the proof of his evil was staring back from behind the very light that illuminated him. The brightest place, and also the darkest place, for a man blind to everything but himself. The sound of heavy footsteps came up the stairs outside the room. Panic seized me. It had to be Preston. I quickly screwed the light bulb back into its socket, twisting it haphazardly until it lit up again. I clutched the newly found memory card and stuffed it into the pocket of my pajama pants. I hobbled as fast as my aching hip would allow to the bed, jumped in, and pulled the covers up to my chest. I shut my eyes, trying to calm my racing heart. Click. The lock turned. Preston entered. "What's wrong with you, Ellie?" he asked suspiciously from the doorway. I slowly opened my eyes, trying to look like someone who had just woken up. "Oh, Preston, it's nothing. I just had a nightmare. It startled me," I answered, my voice genuinely hoarse. Preston stared at me, his eyes sweeping the room, then stopping at the vanity. "Why are the lights on? Who turned them on?" he asked coldly. "The glaring lights of the vanity I forgot to turn off." My brain scrambled for an excuse. I wanted to look at my face in the mirror for a second, to see the bruise, but I got dizzy, so I went right back to sleep. "I forgot to turn it off," I said, praying the excuse sounded plausible. Preston walked over to the vanity. My heart stopped beating as he stood right in front of the bulb I had just removed. He looked at his reflection for a moment, then his hand reached out and flipped the switch. Click. The room grew dimmer. "Turn it off next time." "It's a waste of electricity," he grumbled as he walked out again. "I'm going to get a drink." I let out a breath so deep I felt limp. That was close, so incredibly close. Now I had 2 memory cards, one from Dr. Miles for recording, and one from Rebecca containing the past. And tonight, I had to find a way to combine them into a weapon of mass destruction for Preston's life. The night in this luxurious house stretched on endlessly, as if the clock on the wall had gone on strike, bored of witnessing our domestic drama. At 2 a.m, the house was silent. Beside me, Preston slept on his back, his mouth slightly open, letting out a soft, irritating snore. That snore, which used to keep me awake and make me want to stuff a sock in his nose, now sounded like the theme music for my secret mission. It was a sign that the living, breathing CCTV camera in this house was temporarily offline. This was a golden opportunity, one I couldn't afford to waste. With movements slower than a snail with a backache, I slipped out from under the heavy comforter. Every tiny creak of the mattress made my heart feel like it was going to burst through my throat. I glanced at Preston. He shifted slightly, mumbled something about stocks or money, and then fell still again. Safe. I got out of bed, my feet landing silently on the thick carpet. I didn't dare turn on a light. Guided by the faint moonlight filtering through the curtains, I fumbled my way to the bedside drawer. Inside was an old tablet computer, long unused because Preston claimed the screen wasn't sharp enough, junk in his eyes, but a treasure trove for me tonight. I took the device into the bathroom, the only place in the house with a lock on the inside. I sat on the toilet lid, my hands shaking violently as I tried to turn it on. The battery was critically low, the icon a menacing red, just like my current situation, just enough for one last-ditch effort. I reached into my pajama pocket and pulled out the two small items I had been guarding more closely than diamonds, the memory card from Dr. Miles and the one I found in the vanity. With fingers slick with cold sweat, I inserted Rebecca's memory card first. The screen flickered, then displayed a single folder with a chilling name, "Do Not Open," a classic name for a panicked person. I tapped the folder. Inside was a single audio file. The date was from 5 years ago, the same day Rebecca died. My hand trembled as I pressed play. Static crackled first, then Preston's booming voice filled the small room, even though I had turned the volume down as low as it would go. "You think you can hide that money from me? I know you sent it to your brother, that broke doctor." Then Rebecca's sobbing voice replied, "That was my inheritance, Preston. It wasn't your money." The argument escalated. There was the sound of something shattering, the sharp crack of a slap, then a brief silence, followed by a loud, heavy thud like a body hitting the floor. Then, Preston's ragged, gasping breaths. "Rebecca, wake up! Damn it, don't die on me now." Ugh, whatever. I'll just say she slipped. The recording ended. I covered my mouth, stifling a sob that threatened to erupt. He was insane, utterly insane. He killed his wife over an inheritance and then coolly fabricated an alibi in the same moment she was dying. I quickly ejected Rebecca's card and replaced it with the tracking card from Dr. Miles. The tracking app activated instantly. A map of the house appeared on the screen with a blinking red dot. I saw an option: send data. Without a second thought, I copied Rebecca's audio file to the device's memory and tried to send it to Dr. Miles's system. The home's Wi-Fi signal was thankfully strong, the one positive thing about Preston's luxury amenities. The upload bar moved slowly. 10%, 30%. Come on, hurry up. Suddenly, the bathroom doorknob jiggled from the outside. Click, click. It was locked. My heart stopped. "Ellie, are you in there?" Preston's voice was hoarse with sleep, but laced with suspicion. "Yes, Preston. My stomach hurts," I stammered, trying to sound natural while clutching the tablet with trembling hands. "The upload was only at 50%. This is taking forever." "Open the door." "I have to use the bathroom," Preston commanded, his tone growing impatient. My mind raced. If I opened it now, he'd see the tablet. If I didn't, he'd break the door down. He hated waiting. "Just a second, Preston." "I'm not done yet," I called out, my eyes glued to the screen. 70%. 80%. "Ellie, open this door right now or I'm breaking it down," Preston bellowed, hammering on the door. The patience of a narcissist is as thin as wet toilet paper. 90%. 100%. Upload complete. The green text flashed on the screen. Success. Dr. Miles had the recording. I quickly shut off the screen, shoved both memory cards back into my pocket, and hid the tablet under a stack of clean towels on a shelf. I flushed the toilet for sound effect, then unlocked the door with a shaking hand. Preston stood there, his face sour, his eyes narrowed suspiciously. He didn't go to the toilet. Instead, he just stared at me, scanning me from head to toe. "What were you doing in there?" "Why are you sweating?" he interrogated. "I told you. My stomach hurts." "I probably have a bug," I said, clutching my stomach in an Oscar-worthy performance. Preston grunted and pushed me aside. He entered the bathroom, but instead of heading for the toilet, his eyes swept the room. His predator instincts were firing. He sensed something was wrong. His eyes scanned the soap dish, the sink, and then stopped on the stack of towels where I had hidden the tablet. Damn it. A corner of the tablet's case was peeking out from my hasty hiding job. Preston strode towards the shelf. My breath caught in my throat. He yanked the towel away. The old tablet clattered to the floor. Preston looked at the device, then at me. His face twisted into a horrifying mask, not of an angry husband, but of a murderer who had been caught. He picked up the tablet and turned it on. The screen still showed Dr. Miles's tracking app, which I hadn't had time to close. A map of our house was clearly displayed. "What is this?" he hissed, his voice trembling with barely controlled rage. He smashed the tablet on the marble floor until the screen shattered into 1,000 pieces. You're working with that doctor, aren't you?" he snarled, his voice rising to a shout. He lunged forward, backing me against the cold bathroom wall. "What did you send him? Answer me," he screamed. His right hand shot out, clamping around my neck. I choked, the oxygen in my lungs cut off. "Answer me! You want to destroy me? Huh? You ungrateful bitch? You want to end up like Rebecca?" "Yes," the confession slipped out of his own mouth. As my life hung in the balance, as his grip tightened, I thrashed. My legs kicked at the air. My eyes caught sight of something on the glass shelf behind Preston's back, a can of his extra-strong Hold aerosol hairspray. My left hand fumbled behind him. "Let me go," I wheezed. "Never. You're dying tonight," Preston shrieked, his mind gone. With my last ounce of strength, I aimed the nozzle directly at his wide-open eyes and pressed down hard. The stinging chemical spray shot out, hitting him square in the face. Preston screamed in agony, his hands instinctively flying to his burning eyes, releasing my neck. Ah, my eyes. I collapsed to the floor, coughing and gasping for air. Preston staggered backward, crashing into the glass shower door, cracking it. He was temporarily blinded. I remembered his other physical weakness besides his ego: asthma. He had severe asthma that flared up when he was enraged or exposed to chemical dust. I scrambled out of the bathroom towards the drawer where he kept his medications. Preston was still roaring in the bathroom, but his roars were turning into wheezing gasps. I grabbed his inhaler from the drawer. The small device that could save his life was in my hand. Preston stumbled out of the bathroom, his eyes red and swollen, his breathing ragged. He saw me holding the inhaler. He reached out a hand, grasping desperately. His voice was gone. I stood there, staring at him. A year ago, I would have run to him, crying with worry. But not tonight. I kicked the inhaler. It slid across the floor and disappeared under the dark, narrow gap of the wardrobe. "Get it yourself, Preston," I said coldly. Preston looked at me in disbelief, then at the space under the wardrobe. He tried to crawl towards it, but his strength was gone. He collapsed onto the carpet, clutching his chest, gasping for air like a fish on land. In the distance, I heard the most beautiful sound in the world, the wailing siren of a police car, growing louder and louder as it approached our gate. The wail of police sirens outside the gate was the best song I had ever heard. It was loud and chaotic, but it made my heart want to dance with joy. In front of me, Preston, the great master who was usually fiercer than a guard dog, lay helpless on his favorite imported shag rug. His breath came in pathetic little squeaks, his chest heaving as he tried to gulp down air that seemed to refuse to enter his corrupted lungs. His face, swollen and red from the hairspray, made him look like a circus clown who had failed a stunt. I just stood there, watching him without an ounce of pity. Once, I would have panicked and made him ginger tea if he so much as coughed. Now, I felt like grabbing a snack and watching the show. The bedroom door was kicked open, and several uniformed police officers rushed in, weapons drawn, ready to face a dangerous criminal. Behind them, Dr. Miles appeared, his white coat billowing. He looked like a hero arriving just after the villain had already been defeated. "Don't shoot, he's neutralized," I yelled, raising my hands to show I wasn't a threat. The police secured the room while Dr. Miles, despite a look of extreme reluctance on his face, quickly checked Preston's condition. The irony was palpable. The doctor whose sister this man had murdered was now forced to provide first aid to ensure the killer didn't die before facing justice. "Give him oxygen. Don't let him die. Prison is too good for him if he dies now," Dr. Miles said coldly to the paramedics who followed him in. After his breathing was stabilized with emergency medical help, Preston was handcuffed. Seeing the hands that used to slap me now bound in cold steel brought a sense of satisfaction that no shopping spree could ever buy. He was carried out of the room, past the vanity where he used to admire himself. He looked at me with what little strength he had left, his eyes burning with pure hatred. "You treacherous wife," he rasped. I just gave him a sweet smile, the most genuine one I had ever offered him. "Not treacherous, Preston. Just reaping what you sowed. Consider it a harvest festival." I walked out of that room, stepping over the threshold that for 5 years had been my prison boundary. Downstairs, Manny and Maria stood frozen near the staircase, their mouths agape, shocked to see their esteemed employer being hauled away by the police like a common thief. I paused in front of them for a moment. "Maria, please tell the vegetable vendor tomorrow that I'm canceling the broccoli order," I said casually. Maria just nodded numbly, still in shock. Poor woman. She would probably have to find a new job tomorrow, but at least she wouldn't have to work while holding her breath in fear. The following days were a whirlwind of news reports and police interrogations, but for some reason, I didn't feel tired at all. The recording of Rebecca's voice that I had managed to upload that night became the nuclear bomb that destroyed Preston's entire legal defense. His expensive lawyer threw in the towel, unable to defend a client who was clearly recorded admitting to murder and abusing his current wife, coupled with Dr. Miles's testimony and the medical report of my battered body. Preston had no escape. The model husband image he had cultivated for years crumbled overnight, replaced by the new title, The Monster with an Angel's Face. Rebecca's case was reopened, and this time, the truth couldn't be silenced with hush money. Her body was exhumed for an autopsy, and the results confirmed all of Dr. Miles's suspicions. There was a fracture at the back of her skull, inconsistent with a fall, but consistent with a blow from a blunt object. Preston's sentencing hearing was the most crowded event at the courthouse. When the judge slammed the gavel, sentencing him to life in prison, Dr. Miles wept in the gallery. He hugged me tightly. It wasn't a romantic embrace, but the hug of two soldiers who had survived a deadly war. "Thank you, Ellie. You were reckless, insane. But thank you," he whispered. I laughed a little, wiping away my tears. "You're welcome, doctor. But don't expect me to be a patient in your hospital again anytime soon." The smell of antiseptic gives me trauma. 6 months have passed since that night, and my life has done a complete 180. I now live in a small rental apartment on the outskirts of the city. The paint is peeling a bit near the floor, and the roof leaks a little when it rains hard. It's a world away from the hellish luxury of Preston's mansion. There are no cold marble floors, no blinding crystal chandeliers, and certainly no central air conditioning. But you know what? Sleeping on a thin foam mattress on the floor of this apartment feels more peaceful than sleeping in that king-sized bed that cost as much as a car. I started a small catering business, cooking for office lunches and small parties. It turns out my cooking skills, which Preston used to constantly criticize as too salty, not salty enough, or not aesthetically pleasing, are a big hit with normal people. I wake up every morning not because I'm afraid of being late to iron a shirt, but because I need to go to the farmer's market. The smell of onions and garlic is now my favorite perfume. Sometimes, I still flinch at the sound of a slamming door from a neighbor or people shouting in the street. Trauma is persistent, like plastic waste. It's hard to break down, but I'm learning to make peace with it. This afternoon, I'm sitting on the porch of my apartment, sipping warm, sweet tea from a cheap plastic mug. The sky is a beautiful shade of orange. Suddenly, my phone vibrates. A text from Dr. Miles. It's short. Preston was just moved to solitary confinement for fighting over a food ration. He lost. I laughed out loud reading that. The wheel of fate is indeed round, and sometimes it rolls right over the people who took the wrong path. He used to fight for power. Now he can't even win a fight over a piece of bread. I put my phone down and took another sip of my tea. It was sweet. This time, the sweetness was just right, because I was the one who measured it, not someone else. My name is Eleanor, the ex-wife of a monster, and today I am free.